What's up, everybody? Kim Becker and Cody Rourke here for your weekly AMA for the Denver Broncos, brought to you by Mile High Sports. And, of course, Cody Rourke's tweet that he sends out every week asking what questions you may have when it comes to the Denver Broncos. A lot to talk about as we head into Week 18 of the NFL and, as we know it, the last week for the Denver Broncos season. But last week gave us a little bit of glimmer, a little bit of hope that there might still be, some potential for the Denver Broncos future. Obviously, the head coaching position is the biggest topic as of the last couple of weeks here, Cody. So we'll get this guy rolling with the first question here that we have. What have your first impressions been on Jerry Rosburg, and do you think that he has a chance to solidify that head coaching job?
Well, for a guy who's been coaching football for over 40 years, Jerry Rosburg has come in. He's done a fantastic job, I'd say, in kind of what we would deem maybe as an impossible task, right? I mean, who's well prepared in general in life to inherit a football team that just fired their head coach 15 weeks into the season? Jerry Rosburg made a lot of structural changes, made a lot of coaching staff changes, relieving Dwayne Stukes, special teams coordinator, of his duties, offensive line coach Butch Berry of his duties, appointing Justin Outen as the actual play caller for the Broncos offense, and on top of that, promoting Mike Mallory to the special teams coordinator, and Ben Still, a local Colorado product, to the offensive line coaching position. His fingerprints are all over it, and he had a really great answer on Monday when we met with the media. I asked him a question, and it's something like that happened with the firing of Nathaniel Hackett. Last week, there was a lot of change, and with change brings uncertainty. And I kind of asked him a question, how did he feel the guys, rallied for him, and how do you maintain that for 2 weeks in a row rather than just, in the emotion of the week that it happened? And he said, to be honest, he said, I hate to disagree with your question, but he said, they didn't rally for me. They rallied for themselves. They rallied for these other coaches. They rallied for the fans. And I was like, man, what a great answer. Like, he gives us a little bit more insight, I think, than we got from Nathaniel Hackett. Like, Jerry Rosburg speaks from the heart. He doesn't really operate much from a PR standpoint. He doesn't say a lot of PR speak. With Nathaniel Hackett, as much as I love Hackett as a human being, and I honestly think he's a good coach, it just didn't work out in Denver, and he was in over his head as a head coach. We just got so much of a robotic stance from Hackett every day by day. So much respect for that guy. I mean, it's to the point that someone here at Mile High Sports, you think our digital media team created a bingo card for Nathaniel Hackett press conferences. So I really like what Rosburg has done. I think more than anything, I think he's made a case to at least interview for the job. Will he be a strong consideration for it? I'm not sure. But obviously there's some other coaching candidates I know we'll talk about here today as we have some fans send some questions in.
Yeah, absolutely. And why not interview for the position when he's held it and had a pretty good game 1 week? I know it's only been 1 week, but I guess we'll definitely see how this Chargers game goes on Sunday for Week 18, because that will be another tall tale here to see how the team rallies for another AFC West divisional matchup. The Chargers 10-6, while the Denver Broncos are 4-12 heading into Sunday. So obviously a little bit of a discretion there when it comes to the record, but definitely going to be a good game. And who knows? I mean, the Chargers have been up and down as well, so you never know how the Denver Broncos will perform for their last week here. But yes, we'll move on. Of course, we're talking about some other head coach candidates here. Does anyone know if Harbaugh is interested in coming back to the pros? There's definitely been a lot of speculation on this one for a couple of different teams when it comes to Harbaugh. But when do we expect some interviews to start here, Cody?
Yeah, this is a great question. Everyone's wondering, is Jim Harbaugh ready to make the jump back into the National Football League? I think so many people forget that last year he had an interview lined up with the Minnesota Vikings. And to my understanding, I felt like there was some traction that he was going to take the job, and then they went with Kevin O'Connell.
And the Bears.
So yeah.
He interviewed with the Bears too.
Yeah, there was that, but it also could have been a leverage play by him to get a little bit more money at Michigan, which, I certainly understand. But, I mean, he'll make more money coaching in the NFL than he would at Michigan. Obviously, there's a buyout in his contract. I believe it's on $3 or $4 million, which to the Walton Penner family ownership group, that's nothing. That's just a sneeze in a tissue right there. But outside of that, for Harbaugh, he is one of the more intriguing ones. I know you and I talked about this last week. I deemed him really as the wild card that, everyone should keep an eye on here because he probably has the most appeal. And a lot of reports suggest that, yes, for the right offer, he will leave Michigan to take over an NFL team. And, it could be the Denver Broncos. The Indianapolis Colts are a name to keep an eye on. There could be some other changes coming up around the NFL as we approach Black Monday. And then outside of that, when do some interviews start? When can we expect that? I think that maybe after this week, Kim. I think that obviously with week 18 approaching, it's the final week for a lot of teams. There's going to be a lot of teams that are out of the playoff hunt. There are going to be some candidates that are potentially in the playoffs that the Denver Broncos would like to interview, one being Dan Quinn of the Dallas Cowboys. There's Ben Johnson of the Detroit Lions. There's a matchup between the Packers and the Lions that could determine who gets that final wild card spot, and also contingent upon how the Seattle Seahawks play and the outcome of that game. Shane Steichen is also another name that has been listed as someone that the Broncos could look to interview. But the top three candidates that we all know that are being reported as the ones that the Broncos have the most interest in: Jim Harbaugh, Sean Payton, and Dan Quinn. There will be more interviews outside of that. But, a lot of it is the Broncos have to submit the official request for an interview. We'll find that out. I believe that'll begin next week.
3 huge names there: Jim Harbaugh, Sean Payton, and Dan Quinn. I mean, coming off of last season and how we all felt in the offseason last year, just wanting a fun coach in Nathaniel Hackett and being really excited about the culture change, it's pretty cool to hear those 3 names, because obviously I think you and I can both agree that experience is a big factor when it comes to picking that new head coach. But I'm just curious, I'm kind of going off script here. For Dan Quinn, have you heard anything, Cody, saying that he might want to leave the Cowboys? Because I know that was the whole thing last offseason, right? He didn't want to leave.
Yeah, I think he interviewed for some head coaching jobs last year, and I felt like it had to be the right fit for him to leave, right?
Okay.
And while Denver went with Nathaniel Hackett, that was their choice. Quinn was definitely in consideration for the Broncos. Now, for me, Kim, there's so much contingent upon Jerry Jones here, right?
Yeah.
Jerry lucked out. He got Kellen Moore back. He got Dan Quinn back alongside Mike McCarthy. But I think there's a real scenario here where if the Dallas Cowboys lose in the playoffs, I think that they could fire Mike McCarthy, and then you'd see Jerry Jones make a pursuit for Sean Payton. Obviously, there's a lot of familiarity between the two, and Jerry Jones has always proclaimed that Sean Payton was the one that got away. The Cowboys would trade draft capital to the New Orleans Saints that they do have in order to acquire Sean Payton as their coach. And in that respect, the expectation would be, okay, you would have Sean Payton coming in as the head coach of the Cowboys, and then you'd be bringing Vic Fangio as the defensive coordinator for Dallas. So, there's a situation where that happens, which could free up Dan Quinn. So much is contingent upon how things go in the playoffs, though. But it's also the dilemma here, Kim, because for the Broncos, do they want to wait potentially, right? Because let's say Dan Quinn is maybe one of their top candidates and they're going through the playoffs. Can you wait? Can you wait that long to hire your head coach? Because granted, after the playoffs, the Super Bowl's in February, free agency is in March, and a lot of your free agency moves have to be predicated on your new coaching staff and the philosophy that they want. Are they a good scheme fit? Are they a good team fit for your organization? So many questions have to be answered that aren't just contingent upon who the Broncos, nab as their next head coach. It's also, you have to worry about what other teams are doing right now and how it impacts maybe your plans on pursuing a particular coach. So, Kim, it's going to be a wild offseason. I encourage everybody in Broncos country to buckle up, because this ride is going to be very interesting.
As if we haven't buckled up for the last 6 years, Cody, but I get it. All right, we'll keep this guy going here. Well, you've got a question from Katie. Will we see Albert Okwuegbunam back in Denver next year?
This is a great question. He's still under contract with the Broncos. And if it were up to me, I would say yes, because I think that there are things in Alberto's skill set that you can absolutely utilize. And it was great to see him this past week catch a touchdown against the Kansas City Chiefs. He's got the size and the speed ability to really impact the defense. And you know what? I think it's also the other weapons around him. Now, Jerry Jeudy, on that touchdown catch that Alberto had, the defense was so focused on Jerry Jeudy, who ran that this vertical corner route that brought the safety over because he's the most dangerous threat, and it left Alberto wide open. This is how offense complements one another, right? With your skill players and what they do really well. He's a vertical threat. Let's be honest. Alberto is not a blocking tight end. That's not his strength. So put him in the slot, put him on the outside, and use him as a receiver. He has to be a little bit more consistent with some of the drops. I think that was really due to a lack of confidence. But when he had that touchdown catch, he had a couple of catches late in the game that moved the chains for a first down. It's confidence builders. Unfortunately, Nathaniel Hackett, I don't think really envisioned Alberto being in the game plan. Jerry Rosburg, on the other hand, thought differently. I would more than likely, I would love to see Alberto back in Denver with Greg Dulcich next year. A 2 tight end set of 2 guys who could be receiving threats. You need that in today's NFL.
Okay, not a bad vision there. We're still gonna. Hey, this next question is also talking about envisioning things. So unfortunately, Hackett was not envisioning Alberto there. But what are you envisioning, Cody, when we are looking at Week 18? What is considered a strong finish for the Denver Broncos as they head into this Sunday matchup against the Los Angeles Chargers?
Well, the Chargers in the playoffs, right? So that's big for them. First time since 2018. The Broncos, what's on the line for them? If they lose to the Chargers, they would have gone winless in the AFC West this year, which is, I think, the first time in franchise history, I think, dating back to like the 60s when they weren't, like, the division looked different, obviously.
Yeah.
That's what you want to avoid. But more importantly, like, this is a great opportunity to go on and get a win against a team that is going into the playoffs. Like, imagine being a team that's in the playoffs and you lose in Week 18. I mean, that could impact your confidence. And more than anything, the Broncos, they want to do that. Justin Herbert, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler. It's a tough challenge. Probably one of the toughest challenges the Broncos are going to face to end the year. Obviously, it is the only game that they're granted here, but get a win over a team that is in the playoffs. That's some nice momentum. It's a feel-good thing, and obviously, you get away from being winless in your division, which I think is a huge thing. But more importantly, talking to players, they want to end the season with a win. They want to be able to go out and go into the offseason saying, you know what, this year didn't go how we wanted it to, but we can do certain things. We can be back to where we want to be next year. And I think we've seen it all throughout the season. There's been glimpses that Denver, it's not like Denver needs a complete rebuild. I mean, so many people say, oh, the Broncos should scrap everything, rebuild, and just start over.
No.
I think that what we saw on Sunday against the Chiefs, the fight and the talent, and even though Denver's down, a lot of key starters, Randy Gregory, DJ Jones, Baron Browning on the defensive side of the ball, they still played really well, and they had a chance. They competed with Kansas City. So the narrative that Denver can't compete with KC, that needs to die because they have competed with Kansas City. And they just got to find a way to finish. And I think for Denver, getting a win over a division opponent, a team that's in the playoffs, going into the playoffs this next week, I think they absolutely need to take advantage of that. That would be huge for them.
And not only did they compete with Kansas City, they were in Kansas City. They were at Arrowhead. That is a tall feat in itself to be able to compete with that team at home. So yeah, that definitely should give Broncos country a glimmer of hope. Of course, it was not the season that anyone expected or anticipated or wished for, but this is football. This is the way that it goes. It's hard to win in the NFL, and you got to get all the right pieces together. And like you said, I don't think that a rebuild makes any sense because they've got a lot of really strong pieces. They put a lot of different pieces together this past offseason, and unfortunately, one of the biggest ones didn't work out, but there are still some other big ones that should hold, some importance heading into next season for sure.
Yeah, this has been a wild season. Like, with all the talent that Denver has, nobody thought the season would go this way. I think certainly me covering the team, I think the expectation, we were all talking about it after the trade, is, okay, hey, Denver now all of a sudden is back in the Super Bowl contender conversation. I think it's one of those examples how, okay, going into this upcoming season, maybe we dial back the hype a little bit, right? And kind of set the bar a little bit low, right? Not extremely high. That way, once we exceed the one bar, we can climb to the next, right? You got to crawl before you walk. And maybe that's going to be the approach this offseason with Denver.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Cody. Well, I'll be interested next week when we do this AMA to kind of get your take on the season as a whole, because you've been covering them left and right, front center for the last, I don't even know how many months.
6 years. Oh my.
Well, 6 years. Yeah. But this last season, especially, like we said, we'll look back in the off season of last year and what you thought going into it and then how it unfolded for you. Be very curious just to kind of hear your gut reactions after Sunday's game and what it looks like heading into the off season. But Cody, I wish you the best covering this last game. I am sending all the positive vibes, not only for the Denver Broncos, but for you, because I know it's been a challenge to stay upbeat, but we really appreciate what you do over at Mile High Sports. We appreciate these AMAs. And I know everybody listening is always really loving what you can tell them from that firsthand experience that you get when you go to practices and press conferences and whatnot. So I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Have a fantastic last game here in Denver this weekend, Cody.
Thank you so much. I'm excited. It's going to be a bummer because, you get to the end of the season and you think to yourself, like, oh, now we have to wait until like next year. I mean, when you think about it, next year, realistically, like 6 months, right? Yeah. But it's like the slowest 6 months that you're just like, hey, can football season hurry up and come back? I'm excited. There's going to be a lot because we'll talk about it next week. And we'll talk about some of the opponents that Denver will play next year. Some of that stuff should be solidified after this week. It's going to be fun.
Okay, Cody. Well, thank you so much. We'll see you next week. And to everybody listening, make sure that you're following both Mile High Sports and Cody on Twitter so that you can see that tweet asking what questions you guys may have. And we'll see you right back here next Wednesday afternoon.